7-year-old Emma hadn't spoken a word in over 3 years, her voice locked away by tragedy. Her father, a powerful CEO, thought he'd tried everything, until a chance encounter at a playground changed it all. Curious, stay with us because this story will tug at your heartstrings. Before we dive in, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. Robert Harrison adjusted his Armani tie one more time before stepping out of his black Mercedes in the parking lot of Riverside Park. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the playground, where the sounds of children's laughter echoed like a symphony he'd forgotten how to hear. His 7-year-old daughter, Emma, sat quietly in the back seat, her golden hair catching the light like spun silk, her blue eyes fixed on something only she could see. "Come on, sweetheart," Robert said softly, opening her door. Emma slipped her small hand into his much larger one but said nothing. She never said anything. For 3 years, 2 months, and 16 days, Robert counted every single one, Emma had been silent. Not by choice, the doctor said. The trauma of losing her mother in that car accident had locked away her voice somewhere deep inside, and no amount of therapy, specialists, or prayers had been able to find the key. Robert was a man who solved problems for a living. As CEO of Harrison Industries, a Fortune 500 company, he commanded boardrooms full of executives, negotiated million-dollar deals, and turned failing businesses into success stories. But he couldn't fix the one thing that mattered most: his daughter's silence. They walked toward the playground, Emma's tiny fingers gripping his hand like a lifeline. Other children ran past them, shouting and playing games that Emma watched with longing eyes, but never joined. Robert's chest tightened as he watched her sit on a bench, her legs swinging freely, her mouth sealed shut like a vault protecting treasures too precious to share. "Emma, would you like to try the swings today?" he asked, his voice carrying the same gentle hope it held every afternoon they came here. Emma looked at him with those impossibly blue eyes, Sarah's eyes, and shook her head almost imperceptibly. That's when Robert saw him. A boy, maybe Emma's age, with dirty blonde hair that stuck up in all directions and clothes that had seen better days. His sneakers had holes in them and his t-shirt was 2 sizes too big, probably a hand-me-down. But his smile could have powered the entire city. The boy was building something in the sandbox, his tongue poking out in concentration as he shaped the sand with his bare hands. Other children played around him, but he seemed content in his own world, creating what looked like an elaborate castle, complete with towers and moats. Emma stood up from the bench suddenly, her movement so quick it startled Robert. She walked toward the sandbox with purpose, something he hadn't seen in her for 3 years. Robert followed at a distance, his heart hammering against his ribs. The boy looked up as Emma approached, and his face lit up like Christmas morning. "Hey there, want to help me build this castle? I'm making it for a princess, but I think I need someone who knows what princesses really like." Emma stopped just short of the sandbox, her eyes wide and focused on the boy's creation. She knelt down in the sand, her expensive dress be damned, and reached out to touch one of the towers. "Careful," the boy said quickly but not harshly. "It's still a little wobbly." "My name's Tommy, by the way. Tommy Rodriguez. What's yours?" Robert held his breath. This was the moment that always broke his heart, when other children expected Emma to speak and she couldn't. The disappointment in their faces when she remained silent usually sent her running back to him. But something different happened today. Emma opened her mouth, and for the first time in 3 years, 2 months, and 16 days, she whispered a single word that changed everything. "Emma." Robert's legs nearly gave out. Emma had spoken. His daughter, his silent, precious Emma, had just said her name to a complete stranger. The word hung in the air like a prayer answered, and Robert felt tears streaming down his face before he could stop them. 3 years, 2 months and 16 days of silence, broken by a boy with sandy hair and a heart full of kindness. Tommy's face lit up like the 4th of July fireworks Emma used to love before the world went quiet. "Emma, that's such a pretty name," he exclaimed, clapping his sandy hands together with pure joy. "Just like Princess Emma from my favorite book at the library. She's the one who could talk to animals and make flowers bloom just by smiling at them. Do you want to help me make the drawbridge? I can't figure out how to make it open and close properly." Robert watched in amazement as Emma nodded eagerly, actually eagerly, something he hadn't seen since before Sarah's death. She scooted closer to Tommy in the sandbox, her pristine white dress now decorated with golden sand, and began carefully shaping the entrance to the castle with delicate fingers that hadn't played in years. "My mom used to read me stories about castles," Emma whispered, her voice barely audible, but clear as crystal to Robert's desperate ears. She said, "Every castle needs a secret garden where the princess could go when she felt sad, somewhere beautiful and quiet where she could think about happy things." Tommy's eyes widened with excitement, and he began digging enthusiastically in the sand. "A secret garden. That's the most brilliant idea ever. We could put it right here behind the main tower with tiny flowers made of colored sand." He paused in his digging, looking at Emma with curiosity that held no judgment. "Your mom sounds really smart and nice. Is she picking you up later, or are you going home with your dad?" Robert's breath caught in his throat. This was always the hardest part, the moment when other children asked about Mommy, and Emma's face would close off like shutters slamming shut. He'd watched it happen dozens of times, seen her retreat back into silence when the questions became too difficult to navigate. But today felt different. Today, Emma's hands stilled in the sand, but she didn't run. She didn't shut down. Instead, she looked directly at Tommy with those impossibly blue eyes, Sarah's eyes, and spoke with a steadiness that broke and mended Robert's heart simultaneously. "Mommy's in heaven now," she said simply, her voice carrying a grace that seemed far beyond her 7 years. "She watches me from the stars every night. Daddy showed me which one is hers. It's the brightest one right above our house." Tommy stopped digging completely and looked at Emma with an understanding far beyond his 7 years. The playground sound seemed to fade around them as he processed her words with the serious consideration they deserved. "My daddy's in heaven, too," he said gently, his voice dropping to match Emma's reverent tone. "He went there when I was 5, but I remember everything about him. He had the biggest hands in the world, and he used to build the most amazing sand castles. Mama says he watches me from the biggest star in the sky, the one that looks like it's winking. She says he sends me good dreams sometimes, especially when I'm scared or lonely." Robert felt his heart expand and break simultaneously. These two children, both touched by loss at such tender ages, had found each other in a sandbox and were sharing their deepest pain with the innocent honesty only children possessed. They spoke of death and heaven with the matter-of-fact acceptance that came from being forced to grow up too fast. "Maybe they're friends up there," Emma suggested. And for the first time in over 3 years, a genuine smile tugged at the corners of her mouth. Not the polite, practiced smile she'd learned to wear for doctors and therapists, but a real, spontaneous expression of hope. "I bet they are," Tommy agreed, his own smile matching hers. "And I bet they're really happy we're friends down here. Maybe they even helped us find each other today." As the afternoon sun began to set, casting the playground in golden hues that made everything look magical, Robert realized something profound was happening. His daughter wasn't just speaking, she was healing. The locked-away part of her soul was opening like a flower reaching towards sunlight, and it was all because of a boy with holes in his shoes and a heart bigger than the sky. But as he watched them play, carefully constructing their castle and their friendship with equal care, Robert couldn't shake the feeling that this moment was too perfect, too fragile. What would happen when this afternoon ended? What would happen tomorrow or next week? Could something so beautiful really last? "Daddy, can Tommy come to our house?" Emma asked as they walked back to the Mercedes, her small hand still clutching Robert's, but now with excited energy instead of the desperate need he'd grown accustomed to. Her voice carried a lightness he'd forgotten existed. Robert glanced back at the sandbox, where Tommy was carefully dismantling their castle, saving the sand for tomorrow's children with the kind of thoughtfulness that spoke to his character. The boy looked up and waved enthusiastically at Emma, his gap-toothed grin infectious and pure, the kind of smile that could light up the darkest room. "We'll see, sweetheart," Robert said, though his mind was already racing with questions and concerns. Who was this child? Where were his parents? Why was he alone at the park? And more importantly, what would happen to Emma's newfound voice if this friendship couldn't continue? "Tommy," Robert called out, his CEO instincts kicking in as he approached the boy. "Is someone coming to pick you up? It's getting pretty late." The boy bounded over with boundless energy, sand still clinging to his worn clothes and his hair sticking up in all directions. "Oh, I walk home. It's not far at all, just past the old brewery on Maple Street and around the corner from the laundromat with the flickering neon sign. Mama works at Danny's Diner until 8 o'clock, so I come here most days after school. Sometimes I go to the library first, but the park is my favorite place because you can build things and use your imagination." Robert's blood ran cold. Maple Street was in one of the roughest neighborhoods in the city, a place where even police patrolled in pairs. The idea of a 7-year-old walking alone through those streets every afternoon was unthinkable, the kind of thing that kept parents awake at night with worry. "How long have you been walking by yourself?" Robert asked, trying to keep his voice casual, while his mind calculated all the dangers a child could face in that area. Tommy shrugged with the nonchalance of someone too young to fully understand the risks he faced daily. "Since school started in September. Mama says I'm responsible enough now that I'm 7 3/4. Besides, Mrs. Garcia next door watches for me from her window. And Mr. Pete at the corner store always waves and sometimes gives me a free piece of candy if I help him carry groceries for the old ladies." Emma tugged insistently on Robert's sleeve, her eyes bright with an idea. "Daddy, can we give Tommy a ride home, please? It's getting dark, and he shouldn't walk alone when it's dark." Robert looked at his daughter's pleading eyes, the same eyes that had been empty and lifeless for so long, and knew he couldn't refuse her first real request in years. The protective instincts he felt for Emma extended naturally to this remarkable boy who had given her back her voice. "Of course, Tommy. Would you like a ride home? We'd be happy to take you." The car ride was a revelation that changed everything Robert thought he knew about childhood resilience. Tommy chatted nonstop about school, his favorite teacher, Mrs. Patterson, who let him help with story time, his mother's famous tamales that all the neighbors begged for, and his enormous dream of becoming an astronaut so he could visit his father among the stars. Emma hung on every word, occasionally adding her own soft comments, each one a miracle to Robert's ears. "Do you really want to go to space?" she asked. "That sounds scary." "Not scary," Tommy corrected gently. "Amazing. Think about it, Emma. You could see the whole world from up there, and all the problems that seem so big down here would look tiny. Plus, I bet the view of heaven is much better from space." When they pulled up to a small, weathered apartment building on Maple Street, Robert's heart sank. Paint peeled from the walls like old skin. The front steps looked ready to collapse under the slightest weight, and several windows were covered with cardboard instead of glass. This was poverty in its rawest, most unforgiving form. "Thanks for the ride, Mr." Tommy paused, realizing he didn't know Robert's last name despite their afternoon together. "Harrison," Robert replied, watching the boy's face carefully. "Robert Harrison." Tommy's eyes widened with recognition and genuine excitement. "Like Harrison Industries, the big building downtown with all the shiny windows that reflect the clouds. Mama cleans offices there sometimes on weekends when they need extra help." Robert nodded, surprised the boy not only knew his company but spoke about it with such enthusiasm. "Mama always says the people who work there must be really important because everything is so clean and fancy." Tommy beamed with innocent pride. "That's so cool. Emma, your dad must be like a superhero in a suit." As Tommy disappeared into the building, waving enthusiastically until the last possible second, Robert realized something deeply troubling. Emma had found her voice again. But at what cost? Tommy lived in a world Robert barely understood, a world of struggle and uncertainty that was as foreign to him as another planet. What happened when two worlds this different collided? And more importantly, what happened to Emma if those worlds couldn't find a way to coexist? The next morning, Robert found Emma sitting by her bedroom window in the reading nook Sarah had created years ago, fully dressed in her favorite blue dress, and staring intently at the digital clock on her nightstand. Sunlight streamed through the gauzy curtains, illuminating her golden hair like a halo. "It's only 7:30, sweetheart. We don't need to leave for the park until 3, he said gently, settling beside her on the window seat that had been Emma's favorite spot before the world went silent. "Can we go earlier today?" Emma asked, her voice clearer and stronger than it had been yesterday, each word more confident than the last. "Tommy said he might go to the library before the park today. He's going to read stories to the little kids, and I want to see what books he likes. Maybe I could help him." Robert's heart swelled with joy and worry in equal measure. Emma was speaking in full sentences, showing enthusiasm for activities beyond their quiet, carefully controlled routine, all positive signs that filled him with hope. But her entire emotional recovery seemed hinged on one little boy she'd known for less than 24 hours, and that dependence terrified him. "Emma, honey, we need to talk about Tommy," Robert began carefully, choosing his words like stepping stones across a dangerous river. "He's a wonderful boy, and I'm so happy you've become friends." "But he's my best friend," Emma interrupted with a firmness that surprised Robert completely. "He understands about missing people and having holes in your heart that hurt sometimes, and he makes me want to talk again, Daddy. When I'm with him, the words don't feel stuck anymore." The simplicity and honesty of her statement hit Robert like a physical blow. Tommy made her want to talk again. 3 years of the best therapist's money could buy, countless sessions with child psychologists, specialists flown in from around the world. None of it had accomplished what one afternoon with a boy from Maple Street had achieved. That afternoon, they found Tommy at the public library, exactly where he'd said he would be, and the sight that greeted them took Robert's breath away. Tommy sat in the children's section, surrounded by a diverse group of younger kids who watched him with rapt attention as he brought a story to life with animated voices and expressive gestures. And then the dragon realized that he wasn't scary at all. He was just lonely and misunderstood, Tommy was saying, his voice animated and engaging, his whole body moving as he acted out the story. Nobody had ever asked him why he breathed fire. They just ran away screaming. So when the princess finally sat down and asked him about his feelings, he started crying tears of joy instead of breathing fire. Emma walked over without hesitation and sat cross-legged on the colorful carpet with the other children, completely absorbed in Tommy's storytelling. Robert watched from behind the nearby stacks, amazed and emotional. His daughter, who had barely interacted with other children since the accident, was now part of a group, laughing and clapping along with the story, like she'd never been silent at all. When story time ended and the children scattered to find their own books, Tommy spotted Emma and his face lit up like Christmas morning. "Emma, you came. Did you hear the dragon story? It's one of my favorites because it teaches us that sometimes people who seem scary are just sad inside." "I love stories where everyone ends up happy and understood," Emma replied with growing confidence. "Tommy, you read stories here every day. You're really good at making the characters feel real." "Mrs. Patterson lets me help with story time on Wednesdays and Fridays," Tommy explained with obvious pride. "She says I have a special gift for bringing characters to life and helping kids connect with books. I want to write my own books someday. Stories that help sad kids feel better and less alone." Robert felt something fundamental shift in his chest. This wasn't just a lucky encounter or a temporary bright spot. Tommy was genuinely special. His natural empathy, his intuitive way with children, his resilience despite obvious hardship. These were qualities that couldn't be bought, taught, or manufactured. As they left the library together, Emma slipped her free hand into Tommy's with complete trust, creating a three-person chain that felt more natural than anything Robert had experienced since Sarah's death. For the first time in over 3 years, he felt like they might actually be a family again. But then Tommy mentioned something that shattered Robert's growing sense of peace and changed everything. "Oh, by the way, Mama wanted me to thank you for the ride yesterday, Mr. Harrison. She was worried when I was 15 minutes late getting home. But when I told her all about Emma and our castle, and how we're both missing people in heaven, she cried happy tears." Tommy paused, his expression growing suddenly serious beyond his years. "She said it was the first time in months I talked about making a new friend instead of just missing Daddy. Mom has been really worried about me lately, especially since the eviction notice came. She tries to hide it, but I know she's scared." Robert's blood turned to ice. Eviction notice. This perfect, healing friendship was about to be destroyed by something as brutal and final as an eviction. Robert couldn't concentrate on anything for the rest of the evening. While Emma played quietly in her room, talking to her stuffed animals for the first time in years, creating elaborate stories that drifted through the house like music, his mind raced with Tommy's casual mention of an eviction notice. He tried to convince himself it wasn't his responsibility. He'd built Harrison Industries from nothing by making hard decisions, by understanding that business was business and emotions were luxuries successful people couldn't afford. Getting personally involved in the financial troubles of every person who touched his life was a recipe for disaster. But every time he closed his eyes, he saw Tommy's gap-toothed smile and heard Emma's laughter echoing through the house for the first time since Sarah died. How could he weigh business principles against his daughter's miraculous recovery? At midnight, Robert found himself in his mahogany-paneled study, laptop open, researching everything he could about 847 Maple Street, apartment 3B. What he discovered in the public records made his stomach churn with a mixture of sadness and anger at the unfairness of life. Maria Rodriguez, age 28, worked 3 part-time jobs, cleaning offices for minimum wage in the early morning hours, washing dishes at Danny's Diner during the dinner rush, and occasionally babysitting for neighbors when her schedule allowed. Her husband, Diego, had died in a construction accident 18 months ago, leaving behind massive medical bills from his 3-week fight for life and no life insurance to cushion the blow. The eviction notice was for 3 months back rent, a total of $1,800. Robert stared at the number on his screen in disbelief. $1,800. He spent more than that on a single dinner at Le Bernardin. It was less than he paid for his monthly car detailing service. For the Rodriguez family, it was the difference between having a home and living on the streets. Robert picked up his phone 3 times to call his assistant Margaret to have her cut a check and solve the problem quietly and efficiently, but each time he hesitated. What message would that send? What would happen next month when they couldn't make rent again? Was he solving a problem or creating a dependency that would ultimately make things worse? The next afternoon at the park, Tommy seemed different, quieter, less animated, his usual boundless energy dampened by worry too heavy for young shoulders. When Emma asked him to help build another castle, he agreed, but his heart wasn't in it. His movements were mechanical, distracted. "Tommy, is everything okay?" Emma asked with the intuitive concern that seemed to be her superpower. "You seem sad today. Did something happen?" Tommy's hand stilled in the sand, and for a moment, Robert saw the weight of adult concern settling on a child's face. "Mama cried again last night after she thought I was asleep. The man from the apartment office came by, and he wasn't very nice to her. He said mean things about people who don't pay their bills, and he gave her a new paper that said we have to leave in 2 weeks if we can't pay." Tommy looked up at Emma with eyes that had seen too much. "I don't want to move far away, Emma. I just found my best friend, and I don't want to lose you too." Emma's face crumpled with an expression Robert hadn't seen since the day they told her mommy wasn't coming home. "You can't move away. You're the only one who understands about mamas and daddies in heaven. You're the only one who makes me want to talk." Robert watched his daughter's face cycle through emotions he hadn't seen in 3 years. Anger, fear, desperation, and a fierce protectiveness that reminded him so much of Sarah. It took his breath away. She was feeling again, deeply and completely, and it was both beautiful and terrifying. "Maybe your daddy can help," Tommy said suddenly, looking at Robert with hopeful eyes that carried the weight of a family's future. "He's important, right? Important people can fix things that regular people can't fix." The weight of both children's expectant gazes settled on Robert's shoulders like lead. He was important. He could fix this. But should he? And if he did, what would be the consequences for everyone involved? "I'll see what I can do," Robert heard himself saying, though his mind was screaming warnings about boundaries and complications, and the dangerous territory of mixing business with personal feelings. That night, as Robert tucked Emma into bed in the room that still smelled faintly of Sarah's lavender perfume, she looked up at him with those impossibly blue eyes and said the words that would haunt him for sleepless days to come. "Daddy, if Tommy moves away, I think I might stop talking again. He's the only person who makes the words want to come out of the quiet place where they've been hiding. Without him, I don't know if I'll remember how to use my voice." Robert realized with crystal clarity that he wasn't just being asked to help a struggling family. He was being asked to save his daughter's voice, her healing, her future. But was he strong enough to bridge two worlds that seemed destined to remain apart? And what would be the cost of trying? Robert stood outside 847 Maple Street at 7:30 the next morning, holding an envelope containing a certified check for $5,000, enough to cover back rent and several months ahead. He'd barely slept, wrestling with Sarah's voice in his head, her gentle wisdom echoing through his memory. "You can't solve everything with money, Bobby," she used to say when he tried to write checks for problems that required more than financial solutions. "Sometimes the heart needs more than the wallet can provide. Sometimes people need to feel like they've earned their dignity." But what was the alternative? Let Tommy and his mother get evicted. Watch Emma retreat back into silence. Sometimes money was the only tool he had, the only language he spoke fluently enough to help. The apartment building looked even more rundown in the harsh morning light. Graffiti covered most of the first-floor walls. The sidewalk was cracked and uneven, and the smell of garbage and despair seemed to hang in the air like fog. Robert climbed the creaking stairs to 3B, each step echoing his doubts, and knocked gently. The woman who answered the door was not what he'd expected. Maria Rodriguez was beautiful in the way that hardship couldn't touch, high cheekbones that spoke of indigenous heritage, intelligent dark eyes that missed nothing, and an aura of dignity that poverty couldn't diminish. She wore scrubs that had seen better days but were spotlessly clean, and she held a cup of coffee that smelled like it was mostly chicory and hope. "Harrison," she said, recognizing him immediately from Tommy's excited descriptions. "Tommy told me all about you and Emma. He hasn't stopped talking about his new friend since yesterday. Please come in." The apartment was tiny but immaculate, every surface cleaned until it shone. Everything was organized with military precision, and despite the obvious poverty, there was love in every corner. Tommy sat at a small table doing homework, his tongue poking out in concentration, and he looked up with surprise and delight when he saw Robert. "Mr. Harrison, Emma's daddy, are you here to see my room? I have a telescope that Daddy gave me before he went to heaven, and sometimes I look at the stars and tell him about my day." "Duty, Tommy, finish your math homework," Maria said gently, her voice carrying the authority of a mother who was also her child's anchor. She turned to Robert with curious eyes. "I'm sorry our place is so small. Can I offer you some coffee? It's not fancy, but it's strong." Robert looked around the humble space at the carefully mended furniture, the hand-drawn pictures covering the refrigerator, the nursing textbooks stacked on every available surface. This wasn't just poverty. This was someone fighting tooth and nail to build a better life against impossible odds. "Mrs. Rodriguez," Robert began, pulling out the envelope with hands that weren't quite steady. "I want to help with your rent situation. Tommy and Emma have become very close, and I understand you're facing some difficulties. Consider this a gift." "No." Maria's voice was firm but not unkind, and her refusal hit Robert like a physical blow. "I appreciate the gesture more than you know, Mr. Harrison, but I don't take charity, not even from someone with the kindest intentions." Robert blinked, stunned into silence. In his world, everyone took money if you offered enough. Everyone had a price, a number that would solve their problems and make them grateful. This was foreign territory. "Mrs. Rodriguez, please, I understand your pride, but Tommy and Emma—" "And that's beautiful," Maria interrupted with gentle steel. "My son hasn't smiled like this since his father died, and from what Tommy tells me, Emma is finding her voice again. But money doesn't buy friendship, Mr. Harrison. It complicates. It creates imbalances that children shouldn't have to navigate." "Then what can I do?" Robert asked, genuinely confused and feeling helpless in a way that was completely unfamiliar. "I can't just watch you get evicted when I have the power to prevent it." Maria studied him for a long moment, her intelligent eyes seeming to see straight through to his soul. When she spoke, her words would change everything. "You want to help, give me a job. A real job with benefits and a future. I'm 2 semesters away from finishing my nursing degree, but I can't afford to continue. Help me build something lasting, not just pay for a temporary fix that solves nothing." Tommy looked up from his homework, his young face bright with understanding that amazed Robert. "Mama's really smart, Mr. Harrison. She's going to be the best nurse ever and help sick people feel better. Just like Emma helped me feel better about missing Daddy, and I helped her find her voice again. It's like a circle of helping." Robert stared at this remarkable woman and her extraordinary son, realizing he'd completely misunderstood everything about their situation. This wasn't about charity. It was about opportunity, dignity, and the chance to build something meaningful. But first, he needed to know something that Tommy had just revealed with casual wisdom. Exactly how much did this 7-year-old boy understand about loss, healing, and the miraculous power of human connection to transform lives? 3 days later, Robert sat across from Maria Rodriguez in his executive conference room on the 42nd floor of Harrison Industries. The contrast was stark. Maria in her best dress, which was still clearly secondhand, surrounded by Italian leather chairs and floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a view of the entire city. "I've spoken with our human resources department," Robert began, sliding a folder across the mahogany table. We have an opening in our corporate wellness program. The position involves coordinating health services for our employees, working with our medical staff, and eventually managing wellness initiatives. It's perfect for someone with your background and future nursing degree. Maria opened the folder, her eyes widening as she read the salary figure. Mr. Harrison, this is more than I make in 6 months at my 3 jobs combined. There's more, Robert continued, feeling a strange mix of nervousness and excitement. The position comes with full health care benefits, tuition reimbursement for you to finish your nursing degree, and a daycare facility in the building where Tommy could stay after school until you're finished work. For the first time since he'd met her, Maria Rodriguez looked genuinely stunned. She stared at the papers for a long moment, then looked up at Robert with eyes that glistened with unshed tears. "Why?" she asked simply. "This is incredibly generous, but why are you doing this?" "This goes far beyond helping with friendship between our children." Robert had asked himself the same question 100 times over the past 3 days. The answer had crystallized slowly, painfully, like a truth he'd been avoiding since Sarah's death. "Because Emma hasn't just found her voice again," he said quietly. "She's found her light. And Tommy has something special, something that can't be taught or bought. He has the ability to heal people just by being himself. I've seen what he's done for Emma, what he does with those children at the library. That's not just friendship, that's a gift." Maria's hand trembled slightly as she turned the page. "The position would start immediately. Tomorrow, if you can manage it. We'll provide temporary housing assistance while you transition." "No," Maria's voice was firm again. "No housing assistance. I'll make do with our apartment until I can afford something better. But the job—" She looked up at him with a smile that transformed her entire face. "The job I'll take with gratitude and the promise that you won't regret this decision." As they shook hands, Robert felt something shift in his chest, a lightness he hadn't experienced since before Sarah died. But as he watched Maria gather the papers with shaking hands, he couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just set something in motion that would change all their lives in ways he couldn't imagine. That afternoon, when Tommy and Emma met at the park, the news exploded from Tommy like fireworks. Emma, guess what? Mama got a real job at your daddy's building. A job with insurance and everything. We don't have to move away." He spun around in the sandbox, arms outstretched, sand flying everywhere. Emma's face lit up with pure joy. "Really, really, truly. You get to stay forever and ever," Tommy declared. "And the best part is there's a place for kids in the building, so I can be close to Mama while she works. And maybe sometimes we can see each other during the day." Robert watched their celebration with a warmth in his chest that felt foreign and wonderful. But as other parents at the playground began to notice their interaction, a clearly wealthy man watching his daughter play with a boy from the wrong side of town, he started to understand that their problems were just beginning. The whispers started immediately. "Isn't that Robert Harrison? What is he doing here? That boy's clothes look like they came from Goodwill. How odd to see them together." For the first time, Robert realized that bridging two worlds wasn't just about money or jobs. It was about confronting a society that preferred its classes separate and its charity invisible. But as he watched Emma and Tommy build their latest sand creation, a house with windows facing the sky so they could wave to their parents in heaven, Robert knew there was no turning back. He'd committed to this path, and wherever it led, they would walk it together. 2 weeks into Maria's new position at Harrison Industries, the first cracks began to show. Robert discovered this when his assistant Margaret knocked on his office door with an expression that meant trouble. "Mr. Harrison, we need to discuss the situation with Mrs. Rodriguez," Margaret said, closing the door behind her with unusual care. "What situation? Her work has been exemplary. The employees love the wellness programs she's implementing." Margaret shifted uncomfortably. It's not her performance, sir. It's the perception. Several board members have expressed concerns about your personal involvement in her hiring. There are rumors circulating about favoritism, about you bending company policies for personal reasons. Robert felt his jaw tighten. Maria Rodriguez was hired based on her qualifications and our genuine need for someone with her skills. The fact that our children are friends is irrelevant. Is it? Margaret asked gently. Sir, I've worked for you for 8 years. I've never seen you personally interview a candidate for a mid-level position, let alone someone without a completed degree. People are talking. Before Robert could respond, his phone rang. Emma's school. Mr. Harrison, this is Principal Stevens. Could you come in this afternoon? There's been an incident with Emma. An hour later, Robert sat in the principal's office while Emma fidgeted in the chair beside him, her face streaked with tears. Across from them sat another parent, Mrs. Blackwood, whose daughter Madison was in Emma's class. Emma hit Madison during recess, Principal Stevens explained. But when we asked her why, she said Madison called her friend Tommy Trailer trash and said she was stupid for playing with poor kids. Mrs. Blackwood sniffed disdainfully. Madison was simply observing that Emma seems to have formed an inappropriate attachment to a child from a very different background. Children need to learn about appropriate social boundaries. Robert felt rage bubble up in his chest. But before he could speak, Emma's small voice cut through the tension. Tommy isn't trash. He's the kindest, smartest boy I know. He reads to little kids and makes them feel better when they are sad. Madison doesn't know anything about him, and she doesn't know anything about being sad either. The room fell silent. Emma had just spoken more words in defense of her friend than she'd spoken to anyone at school in 3 years. Emma, hitting is never appropriate, Principal Stevens said gently. But I understand you were defending your friend. That shows loyalty, Mrs. Blackwood's face reddened. This is exactly what I mean. This association is clearly affecting Emma's behavior. Perhaps Mr. Harrison should reconsider allowing his daughter to spend time with children from such different circumstances. Robert stood slowly, his voice deadly calm. Mrs. Blackwood, my daughter has found her voice for the first time in 3 years because of her friendship with Tommy Rodriguez. If you have a problem with that, I suggest you examine your own prejudices rather than questioning my parenting decisions. As they left the school, Emma slipped her hand into Robert's. Daddy, I'm sorry I hit Madison, but I'm not sorry I stood up for Tommy. Mama used to say that standing up for people we love is always right, even when it's hard. Robert squeezed her hand, feeling proud and terrified at the same time. Emma was learning to fight for what mattered to her. But in doing so, she was also learning that their new family configuration would face resistance from a world that preferred its boundaries clearly drawn. That evening, as Robert tucked Emma into bed, she asked the question he'd been dreading. Daddy, why do some people think Tommy isn't as good as me? He's smarter than most kids in my class, and he's definitely nicer. Robert sat on the edge of her bed, searching for words that could explain adult prejudices to a child's innocent heart. Some people judge others by things that don't matter, sweetheart. Things like how much money their families have or where they live. But you know what really matters, don't you? How kind they are inside, Emma said softly, and whether they make you feel like talking when you thought you'd forgotten how. Exactly. And Emma, I'm proud of you for defending Tommy, even though hitting isn't the answer. Next time, use your words. You have powerful words now. As Robert turned off the light, Emma's voice drifted through the darkness. Daddy, are people going to try to make Tommy and his mama go away because they think we don't belong together? The question hit Robert like a physical blow, because the truth was, he was beginning to fear the answer might be yes. The crisis came on a Tuesday morning in November, swift and brutal as a winter storm. Robert was reviewing quarterly reports when Margaret burst into his office without knocking, her face pale and urgent. Sir, You need to see this immediately." She thrust a local newspaper across his desk, her hands shaking slightly. The headline made Robert's blood freeze. Asterisk Harrison Industries CEO's personal charity case. Favoritism or romance. Asterisk below it was a photo of Robert, Maria, Tommy, and Emma leaving the library together the previous weekend, looking for all the world like a family. The article was a masterpiece of innuendo and calculated speculation. It questioned Maria's qualifications, suggested inappropriate relationships, and painted Robert as a CEO who bent company policies for personal gain. Worse, it delved into Emma's history, describing her as the traumatized daughter of the late Sarah Harrison, now potentially being used as a pawn in her father's midlife crisis. "How did they get this information?" Robert demanded, his voice dangerously quiet. The reporter spoke to several employees, former school parents, even some of the park regulars. "Someone's been feeding them details for weeks." Margaret paused. "Sir, the board is meeting in emergency session this afternoon. They're concerned about the company's reputation." By noon, Robert's phone was ringing constantly. By 2 o'clock, the story had been picked up by financial news outlets. By 4 o'clock, Harrison Industries stock had dropped 3%. At 5 o'clock, Robert found himself sitting across from his own board of directors like a defendant at trial. "Robert, we've been friends for 15 years, said Richard Blackwell, the board chairman and Robert's old college roommate. "But this situation has become untenable. The appearance of impropriety is damaging our corporate reputation." "There is no impropriety," Robert said firmly. "Maria Rodriguez was hired based on her qualifications and our genuine need. A woman with an incomplete degree and no corporate experience, hired at a salary 30% above industry standard, whose son happens to be your daughter's best friend." Board member Patricia Wells shook her head. "Robert, even if everything is above board, the optics are terrible." Robert looked around the room at faces he'd known for years, people he'd trusted with his company's future. "Are you asking me to fire her?" The silence stretched like a taut wire. "We're asking you to make a decision about what matters more," Richard said quietly. "Your personal relationships or the company your wife helped you build." The mention of Sarah hit Robert like a slap. Sarah, who had believed in using success to lift others up. Sarah, who would have loved Tommy's spirit and Maria's dignity. Sarah, who had made Robert promise to never let Emma's heart close off from the world. "I need time to think," Robert said, standing abruptly. "You have until Friday," Patricia said. "Either Mrs. Rodriguez resigns, or we'll be forced to call for a vote of no confidence in your leadership." That evening, Robert sat in his study with a glass of bourbon he couldn't taste, staring at a photo of Sarah holding baby Emma. What would Sarah do? What would she say about a world that punished kindness and demanded he choose between his daughter's healing and his company's reputation? His phone buzzed. A text from Maria. Asterisk Mr. Harrison, I've seen the news. I'll submit my resignation tomorrow. Thank you for the opportunity. Tommy and I will be fine. Asterisk before Robert could respond, Emma appeared in the doorway in her pajamas, her face streaked with tears. "Daddy," Tommy called. "He said his mama has to quit her job because people are saying mean things about us being friends. He said maybe we shouldn't see each other anymore because we're causing too much trouble." Robert's heart shattered as he looked at his daughter's devastated face. She'd found her voice, her joy, her best friend, and now adult prejudices threatened to take it all away. "Is that true, Daddy? Do we have to stop being Tommy's family because people don't like us together?" Robert realized that this moment would define not just his future, but Emma's understanding of whether love and loyalty mattered more than public opinion and financial success. His answer would change everything. Robert didn't sleep that night. By dawn, he'd made a decision that would either save his family or destroy everything he'd built. He called Margaret at 6 o'clock a.m. Cancel all my meetings today and call an emergency press conference for 2 o'clock this afternoon. Sir, the board specifically advised against, Margaret began. I'm not asking for advice, I'm telling you what we're going to do. At 7 o'clock a.m., Robert knocked on Maria's apartment door. She answered, still in her pajamas, her eyes red from crying. Mr. Harrison, I meant what I said. I'll resign today. I won't let Tommy and Emma suffer because adults can't handle their friendship. May I come in? We need to talk. In the small living room, Tommy sat at the kitchen table, pushing cereal around his bowl, his usual brightness dimmed. When he saw Robert, he managed a brave smile. Hi, Mr. Harrison. I told Emma she shouldn't be sad about Mama's job. We'll be okay. We're always okay. The child's resilience in the face of adult cruelty broke something in Robert's chest. Tommy, what if I told you that your mama doesn't have to quit? What if I told you that sometimes adults need to stand up to bullies just like kids do? Tommy's eyes widened. You mean like when Emma hit Madison for saying mean things about me? Exactly like that, except instead of hitting, I'm going to use my words. Very public words. Maria stared at him. Mr. Harrison, you can't risk your company for us. It's not worth it. You're wrong, Robert said quietly. You and Tommy have given me my daughter back. You've shown me what matters. And if my company can't survive me doing the right thing, then maybe it's not the company Sarah and I dreamed of building. At 2 o'clock that afternoon, Robert stood before a room full of reporters, cameras, and skeptical faces. Behind him, a large screen displayed the Harrison Industries logo and mission statement. Asterisk, building communities, strengthening families, creating opportunities. Asterisk, good afternoon. I'm here to address recent speculation about my company's hiring practices and my personal relationships. Robert's voice was steady, controlled. 3 months ago, my 7-year-old daughter Emma spoke her first words in over 3 years. She had been silent since losing her mother in a car accident, despite the efforts of the finest specialists money could hire. A murmur went through the crowd. This wasn't what they'd expected. Emma found her voice again because of her friendship with 7-year-old Tommy Rodriguez, a remarkable child who understood loss, who showed kindness without expectation of reward, and who possessed a natural gift for healing broken hearts. Tommy's mother, Maria Rodriguez, is pursuing a nursing degree while working 3 jobs to support her son after losing her husband in a workplace accident. Robert paused, looking directly into the cameras. When I learned that the Rodriguez family faced eviction, I was presented with a choice. I could write a check and feel good about my charity, or I could create an opportunity for a hardworking woman to build a better future for herself and her son. I chose opportunity. I chose to offer Maria Rodriguez a position with our company, a position for which she is uniquely qualified, having overcome adversity while maintaining her dignity, her work ethic, and her commitment to helping others. The room was completely silent. Now, Harrison Industries has always stood for the principle that success means nothing if it doesn't lift others up. Today, I reaffirm that commitment. Maria Rodriguez was hired not because our children are friends, but because she embodies the values this company was built on. Any board member who can't support that decision is welcome to resign. Robert stepped closer to the microphones, his voice gaining strength. I will not apologize for my daughter finding her voice. I will not apologize for recognizing talent regardless of someone's zip code. And I will not apologize for believing that in America, friendship between children should be celebrated, not scrutinized. As Robert left the podium, reporters shouted questions, but he ignored them all. He had said what needed to be said. Now he had to live with the consequences. His phone was ringing before he reached his car. Richard Blackwell's name flashed on the screen. Robert, what the hell do you think you just did? I told the truth, Richard. Something we seem to have forgotten how to do. The board is meeting tonight. This stunt of yours, "Won't be necessary," Robert interrupted, "because I just remembered something important. I own 52% of this company, which means I don't serve at the board's pleasure. You serve at mine." The silence on the other end was deafening. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to go pick up my daughter from school. She's probably wondering if her friendship is about to destroy everything she cares about, and I get to tell her that some things are worth fighting for." As Robert hung up, he realized that for the first time since Sarah's death, he felt like the man she'd married, the man who believed that doing right mattered more than being comfortable. But the real test would come when Emma asked the question he knew was waiting. Had he saved their new family, or had his public stand made things even worse? The answer came sooner than Robert expected. When he arrived at Emma's school, he found her sitting in the principal's office with Tommy beside her, both children holding hands and looking remarkably composed for two 7-year-olds whose world had been turned upside down. "Mr. Harrison," Principal Stevens said, standing as Robert entered. "I called because the children insisted on being together today, and given the circumstances, we thought it best to keep them in the office where they'd be safe from media attention." Through the window, Robert could see news vans in the school parking lot, reporters with cameras waiting for a glimpse of the children at the center of the story. "Daddy," Emma jumped up and ran to him. "Did you really tell everyone on TV that Tommy and Maria should stay? Did you really say friendship is more important than mean people's opinions?" "I did, sweetheart. I told them the truth about what you and Tommy mean to our family." Tommy approached more hesitantly. "Mr. Harrison, Mama saw your speech on the TV at work. She cried, but they were happy tears this time. She said you're the bravest person she's ever met. Tommy, your mother is the brave one, raising you alone, working so hard to build a better life. That takes real courage." "Mr. Harrison," Principal Stevens interrupted gently, "there's something you should know. After your press conference aired, we received over 200 phone calls. Most of them were supportive, parents sharing their own stories about their children finding friendship across social lines, people praising you for taking a stand." Robert felt a small spark of hope. "And the others?" "A few complaints, mostly from people we've had issues with before, but overall, the response has been overwhelmingly positive. It seems your message resonated with more people than you might have expected." As they prepared to leave through the back entrance to avoid the media, Emma tugged on Robert's sleeve. "Daddy, can Tommy come home with us today? I want to show him Mama's garden. I think he'd like to see where she planted flowers that come back every year, even after winter makes them sleep." Robert looked at these two remarkable children who had found each other across impossible odds and rebuilt each other's broken pieces with nothing but pure friendship. "Of course he can, sweetheart. I think your mama would love for Tommy to see her garden." That evening, as Robert watched Emma and Tommy reading together in Sarah's garden while Maria helped prepare dinner in his kitchen, his phone rang. The caller ID showed Richard Blackwell's number. "Robert, I owe you an apology. The board met tonight, and after seeing the public response to your speech, we've unanimously decided to support your position. More than that, we want to expand the wellness program Maria is developing, make it a flagship initiative." Robert stepped outside where he could speak privately. "What changed your mind, Richard?" "My wife. She reminded me that our daughter struggled with anxiety for 2 years after our divorce, and the only thing that helped was a friendship with a girl from a completely different background. Sometimes we get so focused on protecting what we have that we forget why we built it in the first place." Through the kitchen window, Robert could see Maria and Emma working side by side, teaching each other. Maria showing Emma how to season the vegetables, Emma showing Maria which herbs grew in different parts of the garden. "Richard, there's something else. I want to establish a scholarship fund, the Sarah Harrison Memorial Scholarship for single parents pursuing health care degrees. I want to make sure other families like Maria's have the opportunities they deserve. Consider it done. And Robert, that little boy of hers, he's something special, isn't he? Robert watched Tommy carefully watering the plants Emma had shown him, explaining to each flower why it was important to drink water to grow strong. He is. They both are. As Robert hung up, Emma appeared at his side, slipping her small hand into his. "Daddy, Tommy wants to know if we can have dinner like this every week, like a real family that chooses to be together instead of having to be together." Robert looked down at his daughter's hopeful face, then back at the kitchen where Tommy was making Maria laugh with an animated story about his day. "I think that sounds perfect, Emma. I think Mama would want us to choose our family with our hearts." But as Robert said the words, he realized there was still one more test coming, one that would determine whether their unconventional family could truly survive in a world that preferred its love stories simple and its social lines clearly drawn. Tomorrow would bring the ultimate challenge, and Robert wasn't sure any of them were prepared for what it would reveal. The final test came on a cold December morning, 6 months after Emma first spoke Tommy's name in that sandbox. Robert was reviewing the Sarah Harrison Memorial Scholarship applications when Margaret knocked on his door with an expression he'd learned to recognize. The look that meant someone from their past was about to collide with their present. "Mr. Harrison, there's someone here to see you. She says it's about the Rodriguez family, and she won't speak to anyone else. Her name is Dr. Elena Martinez, and she seems upset." The woman who entered Robert's office was in her 50s, with graying hair pulled back severely and the bearing of someone accustomed to difficult conversations. She carried herself with the authority of someone who delivered life-changing news for a living. "Mr. Harrison, I'm Dr. Martinez from Children's Hospital. I was Emma's trauma counselor for the first year after the accident." She paused, studying his face. "I need to talk to you about Tommy Rodriguez." Robert's blood turned cold. "Is Tommy sick? Has something happened?" "No, nothing like that, but there's something you need to know. Something I should have told you months ago when I first saw the news coverage. Doctor." Martinez sat down heavily, as if the weight of her words was too much to bear standing. "Mr. Harrison, Tommy Rodriguez was also my patient." The words hit Robert like a physical blow. "What do you mean?" 18 months ago, when his father died in that construction accident, Tommy was in the car that brought Diego to the hospital. He saw everything: the accident, the ambulance, his father's final moments. He developed selective mutism, just like Emma. For 8 months, Tommy didn't speak to anyone except his mother, and even then, only in whispers. Robert felt the room spinning around him. "That's impossible. Tommy talks constantly. He's the most verbal child I've ever met." "Now he is. But when he first came to me, he was as silent as Emma ever was. His healing began about 4 months ago, right around the time he met Emma." Dr. Martinez leaned forward, her eyes intense. "Mr. Harrison, what happened between Emma and Tommy in that sandbox wasn't just friendship. It was two traumatized children recognizing each other's pain and healing each other through connection." The revelation shattered everything Robert thought he understood. Tommy hadn't helped Emma find her voice. They had found their voices together. The boy, who seemed so confident, so naturally gifted at helping others, had been fighting his own battle with silence. "Why didn't Maria tell me?" Robert asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Because Tommy made her promise not to." He was afraid that if people knew he'd been broken too, they wouldn't trust him to help Emma. He was protecting her recovery by hiding his own journey. Robert closed his eyes, seeing every interaction between the children in a new light. Tommy's wisdom about missing parents, his instinctive understanding of Emma's silence, his natural ability to connect with hurting children, it all made perfect, heartbreaking sense. "There's more," Dr. Martinez continued. "The day of Diego's accident, He was working on a construction project for Harrison Industries. The building site where he died was the foundation for your new corporate headquarters. Robert's world tilted on its axis. Diego Rodriguez had died building Robert's dreams while Robert sat in board meetings planning the future. The man whose death had traumatized Tommy was killed creating something for the Harrison family legacy. Dr. Martinez, why are you telling me this now? Because Tommy is struggling again. The media attention, the scrutiny of his friendship with Emma, it's bringing back his trauma. Maria called me yesterday because he's starting to withdraw, starting to blame himself for the problems your family is facing. He thinks if he hadn't been broken, none of this would have happened. The irony was devastating. Tommy, who had saved Emma by being brave enough to speak first, was now retreating into silence because he feared his brokenness was hurting the people he loved. Robert stood abruptly. I need to see him now. 20 minutes later, Robert found himself back at 847 Maple Street. But this time, he wasn't carrying a check or a job offer. He was carrying the weight of understanding and the determination to save the boy who had saved his daughter. Maria answered the door, her face streaked with tears. Mr. Harrison, I was going to call you. Tommy's been so quiet since yesterday, he won't even talk to Emma on the phone. Maria, we need to talk, all of us together. They found Tommy in his room, sitting by the window with the telescope his father had given him, staring at the cloudy sky with eyes that had lost their light. When he saw Robert, he managed a weak smile. Hi, Mr. Harrison. I'm sorry I've been weird lately. I don't want to cause any more trouble for Emma. Robert sat on Tommy's small bed, his heart breaking for this remarkable child who carried burdens too heavy for young shoulders. Tommy, Dr. Martinez came to see me today. She told me about your dad, about the accident, about how you couldn't talk for a long time, too. Tommy's face crumpled. She promised she wouldn't tell. I made her promise. Why didn't you want me to know? Because, Tommy's voice broke. If people knew I was broken too, they might think I was making Emma worse instead of better. And because my daddy died building something for your company, and I was afraid you'd feel too sad about that to let us be friends anymore. The words shattered Robert's heart into 1,000 pieces. This 7-year-old boy had been protecting everyone, Emma, Maria, even Robert himself, by carrying his pain alone. Tommy, look at me. Robert waited until the boy met his eyes. Your father didn't just die building something for my company. He died building something that would create jobs for hundreds of families, something that would help other people achieve their dreams. He was a hero just like you. I'm not a hero. I'm just a kid who got scared and stopped talking. You're a hero because you found your voice again and you used it to help Emma find hers. You're a hero because you saw someone else who was hurting and you chose to be brave for her when you were still learning to be brave for yourself. Tommy wiped his nose with his sleeve. Really, really. And Tommy, there's something else you need to know. Your daddy's accident led to new safety regulations that have saved dozens of other workers' lives. His sacrifice meant something, just like your friendship with Emma means something. As Robert spoke, he saw the light slowly returning to Tommy's eyes. But the real magic happened when Emma appeared in the doorway, having convinced her driver to bring her to the apartment when Tommy wouldn't answer her calls. Tommy Rodriguez, she said with the fierce authority of a 7-year-old on a mission, you stop feeling sorry for yourself right now. We're both broken and we fixed each other, and that's the most beautiful thing in the whole world. If you try to take that away by being sad about it, I'm going to be very mad at you. Tommy stared at her for a moment, then burst into laughter, the first real laughter Robert had heard from him in weeks. Emma Harrison, you're the bossiest best friend anyone ever had. Good. Now come here and help me tell our dads that we want to do something special for all the kids whose mamas and daddies are in heaven. As Robert watched the children embrace, their healing connection stronger than ever, he realized that this had never been a story about a rich man helping a poor family. It had been a story about broken people finding each other and choosing to become family despite, or perhaps because of, their shared wounds. 6 months later, Robert stood in the brand new children's wing of the Harrison Family Healing Center, watching Tommy and Emma lead a support group for children who had lost parents. The center, built with funds from the Sarah Harrison Memorial Foundation and staffed by Maria Rodriguez Harrison, who had legally become part of their family through adoption, served families from every corner of the city. The thing about missing someone, Tommy was telling a room full of children, is that it never stops hurting completely, but it can start hurting less when you find other people who understand. Emma nodded seriously. And when you help other kids who are sad like you were, it makes the sad turn into something useful, like how flowers grow from dirt. The dirt isn't pretty, but it makes beautiful things possible. Robert smiled, remembering Sarah's favorite quote, "Healing isn't about forgetting the pain. It's about transforming it into something that helps others hurt less." As he watched his daughter, their daughter, help another silent child find words, Robert understood that this had always been Sarah's plan. Somehow, from whatever place she watched over them, she had orchestrated this entire beautiful collision of broken hearts learning to beat in harmony again. Emma caught his eye and waved, her smile bright enough to power the entire city. Beside her, Tommy grinned and gave Robert a thumbs up before turning back to help a little girl who was trying to say her father's name for the first time since his death. Two children who had found their voices in a sandbox had become healers for a world full of people learning to speak after silence. And Robert Harrison, the CEO who had once thought love could be measured in dollars and success could be quantified in profits, had learned that the most valuable things in life couldn't be bought. They could only be chosen, nurtured, and shared with hearts brave enough to remain open despite the risk of breaking. In the end, Emma had been right from the very beginning. Sometimes the most beautiful thing in the whole world was simply two broken people choosing to fix each other, one word at a time.